Well, let's go ahead and kick off this evening. We appreciate you taking this time to hear how both our alumni and our students have successfully navigated opportunities in banking and investments. My name is Diane Eisminger, and I'm Director of Furman's Internship Office. And before we begin, I'm going to ask my colleague Lauren Payne, Director of the Malone Center for Career Engagement, to administer a short poll so we can get a better idea of who we have on the phone or on our video conference this evening. After that, we'll turn it over to our moderator and Chief Investment Officer, Chris Kapoor. Please use the chat function if you have any questions for our panelists this evening, and Laura and I will monitor those and provide those to Chris to share with the panelists. Also, we want to make you aware that we are recording this session. Lauren, if you'd like to administer the poll.
All right, I think everybody should be able to see the poll. If you would just take a minute just to tell us what your class level is for the upcoming academic year, or if we have some alum and faculty and staff with us, and then also let us know what you're most interested in learning about tonight, whether that be internships, full-time opportunities, or both internships and full-time opportunities. So it looks like they're still coming in, so I'll give it another few seconds. All right, it looks like most everybody's completed it, so I will end the polling. And here are our results. So it looks like, actually second year and junior students are our largest audience. We've got a couple of seniors with us and some faculty and staff with us. And then as far as what they're interested in learning about, it looks like both internship and full-time opportunities. So I think we've got the right panelists with us.
Greetings from campus, everyone, and thank you for joining us. It's an honor to be with you this evening to facilitate a conversation with 6 Furman Paladins, 3 current students, and 3 alumni finance professionals. Each has a unique background, but one common thread. They hope that sharing their experiences this evening can help each of you navigate your path to both great internships and a successful start to your career. Although we'll mainly be talking finance and banking, I believe this hour will be helpful to any student regardless of your career ambitions. During the panel, you'll pick up distinctions between commercial banking, investment banking, and asset management, and the skills required for each. Some students are not too sure about what the real differences are, but we can spend more time on that later during Q&A if needed. Before we get started, I'd like to briefly introduce our roster of panelists, which I'll group by company. You can see their full bios in the information provided. I'll start with Bank of America. Jackson Bonamia has been with the bank since 2017 in several different investment banking roles. As a student, he was not only busy with math and econ classes, he was a student athlete, a member of the investment club, and asked a lot of questions when he interned in our office with my colleague, Rob Kenny. Rachel Sindler, currently interning at Bank of America, is a math econ major and is involved in multiple activities all over campus. As tenacious as she is on defense for our lacrosse team, you should see her prepare for interviews. She's a great example for those students who figure out early what they want to do, plan, and execute. Now on to Barings. Sarah Langley is an associate director in the Barings Real Estate Group. For those of you who don't know Barings, it's a $350 billion asset manager covering multiple asset classes. I was lucky enough to help teach Sarah in Business 440 Investments Management, and I still remember meeting with her prior to her interview with First Tryon during her senior year. Clark Mortel, currently interning at Barings, has had a couple of unique internship experiences along with other activities around campus. It seems like just yesterday that we celebrated his completion of the internship in our investment office. Now on to Wells Fargo. Jeff King is an '88 grad with a great Furman story. His liberal arts background with coursework in history, music, and German is not the typical path for a 3-decade-long successful career in commercial banking, culminating in leadership positions across different divisions. I still believe learning how to learn the Furman way can set you up for any career specialty. Christina Bonin is studying public health and econ. She too has had a unique set of experiences with the Prisma Health Office of Innovation, being an RA, and she's active with mock trial. So without further ado, let's jump right into the questions. First, I'm going to start with a series of questions for each of the professionals, and I'll go in the following order: Jeff, and then Jackson, and Sarah. So on to you, Jeff. Can you describe your current role, please?
Sure, glad to. So I currently lead business engagement for our wholesale fraud program. This involves managing a team of business risk and control officers who work across our 8 wholesale lines of business to ensure they're consistently and effectively managing internal and external fraud risks, as well as identity theft risks. Among these businesses are commercial banking, corporate investment banking, treasury management, Wells Fargo commercial capital, commercial real estate, investment portfolio, and our wholesale control and chief operating offices.
Jackson, on to you. Can you describe your current role?
Absolutely. So I currently work within Bank of America's investment bank, where I work in financial institutions. I mainly cover large asset managers such as Barings. I cover financial technology companies and specialty finance companies. We mainly help our clients explore mergers and acquisition opportunities, as well as IPOs and debt raises and any other trade that's in between that. My day-to-day is kind of mainly focused around Excel and PowerPoint and detailed financial analysis to explore these opportunities and put together an end product to ultimately go to a client and entice them to do one of these transactions.
Thank you, Jackson. Sarah, what's your current role like?
Hi, so I work at Barings as an investment specialist / product manager for real estate debt. So my role is kind of an intermediary between our general sales team that sells all of Barings products to investors, and then the real estate debt team that actually is responsible for originating and managing our real estate investments on behalf of our clients. So we are generally an investor's first point of contact from within the real estate team as a specialist for this product. And so a big part of our job as an intermediary between the two groups is to kind of combine what we hear in the market as to what investors have appetite for with what opportunities our investment team is seeing in the market. And so as part of this, my team leads any product development, such as the launch of funds, and just generally drives the strategy for capital raising within my asset class.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And back to you, Jeff. Can you describe or tell us, how did you break into the industry first coming out of Furman?
Sure, it's an interesting story. I'll probably have a chance to chat about this more later in the webinar, but it was actually through a summer internship opportunity.
Jackson, I still remember those 6 days. Tell the crowd how you broke into the industry.
Well, first off, I wouldn't be in my industry today if it weren't for a lot of Chris Kapoor and Rob Kinney's help. So thank you guys very much for that. But it was really a full court press effort as soon as I figured out that I wanted to work in finance and banking. I basically started networking and adding people on LinkedIn with any connection to Furman and finance. Started reaching out to more people that Chris introduced me to. One individual being Peter Griffin, who's a Furman alum as well and works at B of A. Hit it off with him through the Furman Metropolitan Fellowship, and from there, he made sure that my resume got seen for a summer internship opportunity. Came up, interviewed, got a summer internship opportunity that summer between my junior and senior year, accepted a full-time offer after that, and I've been at B of A ever since.
Great. Sarah, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, so I went into my senior year saying that I wanted to work in finance, and it didn't take long for me to figure out how broad that really was. So I applied to several things, that looked interesting in finance and in cities I'd be willing to live in. And ultimately, a few didn't work out, for various reasons, until I interviewed for a financial advisory firm within public finance. And I was just really attracted to, to the company's culture and the role. And so ended up joining that firm as soon as I graduated college and worked there for a couple years until I switched to my current role at Barings. And I connected to Barings really just by networking with the friends I'd made in Charlotte. And I had a friend in Charlotte that ultimately ended up introducing me to the girl that hired me at Barings. And the roles are actually very different. But I think the skills I developed outside of just the technical knowledge, because they're very different parts of the industry, but learning how to convey those skills and how they're transferable, I think allowed me to make a pretty smooth transition between the two roles.
Very good. We're going to pivot a little bit now and talk about some of what's going on in the marketplace. Jeff, what are the opportunities and challenges of your work right now, especially given the current economic environment?
Well, there's no question these are challenging times for everyone. Banking is exciting and represents continuous change even in the most favorable environment. For me, the challenges we're facing right now are really not a lot different than in the last 3 years of my career. I work my hardest every single day, and I have no regrets about doing that. That's really the way I've lived my career for the last 3 years. And when hard times and uncertainty surface, I still show up the same way. You can't control everything, but maintaining calm and staying focused on your goals and objectives help leaders see your value proposition and see you demonstrate that during crisis. And as things change, they're more apt to recognize you're someone they want to able things play out and stabilize. So I can honestly say that with every change I've been through, it's been a good change at the end of the day. Some have been more painful than others, but it's been good for me personally and almost everyone I've had the opportunity to work with. So what I would say is, uncertain economic times are going to ebb and flow, but the way you look at those and handle those and maintain that stability, that really helps you move through those challenges.
Thank you, Jeff. Jackson, I imagine your line of work has been fairly interesting over the past 4 or 5 months. Tell me about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can imagine, kind of going into the crisis, we were just kind of concerned if the lights were going to be kept on, because the situation was kind of very similar to the global financial crisis with the markets in turmoil. But as things stabilized and the Fed stepped in, it kind of turned back to business as usual. And COVID ended up killing deals and transactions we were working on, but it also kind of catalyzed some other ones. So as far as work goes, it's kind of business as usual there. In terms of like switching to work from home, for the most part, it's been fairly seamless, although there is kind of a little bit less communication verbally with people and interaction from that perspective. Also, kind of being so close to your desk at all times of the day has extended my workday probably 5 to 10%, which when you already work a lot of long hours is not great. In terms of career opportunities, it hasn't been great, but we're kind of developing ways to stay in touch and interact more with our colleagues, which I think will be great. And I think business will continue to adapt. I'd say the biggest positive is for me, being in New York City and being from Atlanta and working remotely, I've been able to come back home, spend some time with my parents, my family, my nieces and nephews, get away to the lake, get away to the beach, and kind of continue to do my job. So I'm pretty hopeful that we'll be able to work more remotely in the future.
Thank you, Jackson. Sarah, tell us about the opportunities and challenges that you face.
Yes, I would say for me, just to start off with, the financial crisis is something that I just read about in the textbook, and now actually, living through, something with a similar impact on the financial market, or at least it's been interesting to see, and definitely not like anything I've experienced so far in my career. I would say a challenge of it is I would say this is probably applicable to a lot of people that are younger in their career, is there's a big benefit of getting to, sit next to your boss, people that you work with, just to get to see, how they do their job and to be able to learn from them. And that interaction is really helpful. So not having that is tough, but I'd say overall, I'm shocked at how quickly the world and my industry adapted. And I mean, it all happened so quickly. And within a week, I felt like we were on a good routine, and, just obviously within my company, but also with investors, just the industry more broadly. I would have never thought that we'd be able to do an 8-hour-long diligence meeting over something like Zoom, and, we'd be able to pull it off. And I think I've just been impressed at how quickly we've been able to adapt, and the fact that we have the technology to be able to do it is incredible.
Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that. And before we turn back to Jeff, this last question, we're starting to think through the lens of our student participants that are viewing us today. and just share with us, both interns that each of you is perhaps looking to hire, as well as full-time associates. What are you looking for in the talent with those students to help you meet some of the challenges that you just described? Let's start with Jeff.
Okay, so for me, I would say a critical thinker, someone who has analytic and problem-solving abilities, someone who's detail and execution-oriented and has the ability to work independently. Of course, exceptional written and verbal communication skills are necessary. And then the ability to demonstrate skill in relationship building, collaboration, and teamwork. I think a humble, confident, someone who can listen and ask questions and seek to understand. And finally, someone who can multitask. Those multitasking skills are so important because you've got to have the ability to manage many efforts at one time.
Hey, Jackson, I know you, just like you were referencing Peter earlier, you've been pretty active talking with current undergrads as well as folks that have recently graduated. Describe what you think you yourself as well as your teammates around you are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely something I'm passionate about. And I would just say, look at Rachel and Christina and look at their profiles. I've spent a lot of time with Rachel over the last 2 years, and I spent a little bit of time with Christina through the Furman Metropolitan Fellowship, and they share some pretty consistent traits. And I encourage everyone here, and apologies to Rachel and Christina in advance for this, but I encourage you all to reach out to them and kind of learn more about their story, more than what's shared tonight and how they got there. Because their profiles are really the ones that we're looking for at Bank of America and basically across investment banking and bulge bracket finance in general. And it gets harder every year. The profiles that we look at look more and more competitive. By the time they get to us, the kids have done 2 or 3 great internships, and that's not always necessary. But there are a few things that are a bit of a hurdle for us. And I would say, getting to more granular details, starting with a solid GPA. Both Rachel and Christina have above 3.7s in their respective majors. And in general, for us at B of A, if you have below a 3.5, we generally won't consider your resume unless you're an athlete. And we definitely make exceptions for athletes in those circumstances. And even then, it's really kind of more a 3.4, 3.5 scenario. I'd say after that, once that's out of the way, a genuine interest in finance and markets, or at least that you can convince me that you have a genuine interest, would be the next thing. You need to be coachable. You need to have attention to detail. You need to have passion for the things that you're interested in. Can you get me excited about what you're talking about? Whether it's finance, whether it's your sport, whether it's your hobby, whatever it is, if you can make me excited and you can make me think that you're someone I want to work with, that's definitely a characteristic that we always look for. And lastly, and most importantly to me, is drive. Can you be motivated enough to get what you need to done when you're exhausted and you're tired? With what we do, we average hours in excess of 80 to 90, and we need people who are so driven that they can keep going even when they're tired. And, with Rachel specifically, in her example, she would be taking very difficult classes. She'd be practicing, she'd be doing training, and, she'd email me at 1 o'clock in the morning on a monthly basis, basically saying, what else should I be doing? And that showed me that really, no matter what I did or what I said, she was going to make sure that she got the job that she wanted. And those are characteristics that I can't teach you. I mean, I can teach you all the financial modeling and the math, but your passion and your drive are something that's you, and I can't teach that. So those are things that we look for.
Hey, Clark, you were left out of that example, but I will vouch for you and all your work over here in the office. Hey, Sarah, one thing that stands out with you, both while you were at First Tryon and at Barings, you and your colleagues have reached back out to Furman and have made at least conversations and opportunities available. So knowing that, tell me what you think you're looking for through the lens of a sophomore, junior, senior here today.
Yeah, sure. So actually, these are a couple things that Jackson and Jeff mentioned, but I'm going to dive into them in a little more detail. But I definitely echo everything that they said are all super important things, and couldn't echo them more. But the 2 main things that I want to talk about are the attitude and intellectual curiosity, and then the second is attention to detail. And so going back to the first, attitude and intellectual curiosity, I think this is single-handedly what makes a mediocre job, on a seminar project into a great job. It's just being able to the intellectual curiosity that leads you to asking the good questions, some that maybe even your boss didn't think of, and kind of that willingness to get it right. I think you just need to find, even though every day is not maybe the most exciting, you have to just genuinely be interested in what you're doing. I think it's what just makes you good at your job and makes it enjoyable for you. And then the second, attention to detail, which interns I've had in the past will probably laugh when you hear me say this now because I harp on it so much. But to me, this is something that I think is in your control. I think for me as an intern, it's not necessarily, your fault if you don't know everything about the industry, like someone who's been there 20 years or don't perfectly grasp the concept. I think that was something that intimidated me, is just feeling like I didn't know enough, going into the industry. But that's what questions are for, and that's what, people that are mentoring you are there to help. But I think what you can control, like as an intern or someone that's new to industry, is not making the same mistakes twice, is, making sure things look good and you don't have, little mistakes in your material, because then, people will always question it, and that's not a reputation that, anyone wants to make. So yeah, and I think it sounds small, but attention to detail and things looking mistake-free and clean, this, I think, speaks volumes in our industry, and it's really important to get a good work product out there, and your investor, wherever the materials are for, trusting ultimately what you're putting together, what you're saying to them.
Very good. Thank you, Sarah. And let's shift over to the student interns for a few minutes and see if we can provide some action items for our audience. And we'll go in the order of Rachel and then Christina and Clark. And the first question I'll pose to you is, you've accomplished what many students strive for. These are all coveted internships with marquee banking and finance organizations. Can you describe what the process was like for each of you? And again, I'll start with Rachel first.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So as Jackson mentioned earlier, I met Jackson on a career trek. So it was the first ever finance career trek to New York City. I was actually one of the few underclassmen, so it was fall of my sophomore year when I met Jackson. And that was sort of my first sort of experience with high finance and going to Bank of America. And so after I met Jackson, we kicked it off, and I probably bothering him a lot in the first couple months of of his mentorship, but I really used him as sort of my key anchors and sort of where I should go. I set an end goal and I sort of worked backwards. So he connected me with Chris Kapoor, sat down, sort of laid out my game plan for the next 2 years. So Jackson, what was really helpful is he connected me with a lot of his peers from Furman who were within the same year or two that he graduated. And so I talked with them, found an internship in Greenville summer after my sophomore year going into my junior year. And that sort of gave me that experience to include on my resume and make me a competitive applicant for Bank of America. So the next year, or into that summer that I was working in Greenville, I was networking like crazy. I'd reach out to Jackson's colleagues that he would introduce me to, really just use any connection I could find through LinkedIn, through Furman. If I would meet someone through Jackson, I would then ask them who they thought it would be helpful if I talked to, really just to gain a better understanding of what I wanted to do personally, and also to make me, again, a competitive applicant and have a better understanding of the industry I wanted to pursue.
Thank you, Rachel. Christina, what was the process like for you?
Yeah, so I had a pretty different experience from both Rachel and Clark, because this was not the original plan. I came to Furman as a chemistry major and then ended up studying economics and public health, thinking that I was going to go into healthcare. But last summer, I interned with Prisma's Office of Innovation, which did a lot more investment and advising for different companies in healthcare. And I just thought it was so cool and thought that it was something I wanted to pursue further. So at the end of last summer, I kind of switched gears and decided to apply to different banking internships. And I mean, the deadlines were coming right up, so I didn't have much time to blink, but I just turned it around. I was able to get lots of applications in. I kind of treated it like my third job. I mean, every Sunday I dedicated the full day to just filling out applications, getting them out. And it was a very wild process. I had some initial interviews, some which were phone interviews, some that were kind of these asynchronous recorded interviews. But ultimately, I was able to get a handful of final interviews. And with that, again, I am not studying accounting, I'm not studying finance. So I was actually connected to Chris through Jackson, and was able to get on the phone with him. And we talked for about an hour, and he just gave me a list of questions and was like, know this. And so I spent the next 2 weeks or so just learning every single thing that he told me I needed to know to prepare for the interviews. And with that, I was able to go to the interviews, do really successfully, and had a couple offers to choose from.
Well, there's a secret. I asked you all those questions, but I didn't know any of the answers. Hey, Clark, on to you. Tell me about the process that you had getting into Barings.
Yeah, sure thing. So during my sophomore summer, I was able to kind of work at a wealth management firm down in Florida where I lived for the summer just to kind of provide a foundation. And then following that, I was able to work in my junior fall with Chris and Rob in the investment office. That seems to be the key theme along everybody's stories, to get connected with Chris. But that also provided another foundation. So then I was a little bit later on in the process than Rachel and Christina were. I went on the Charlotte career track that was offered in January through the internship office. And essentially they toured and connected with Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Barings in Charlotte. It was just a quick weekend trip. And during my time at Barings on the last day, I was able to connect with another Furman alumni. And she mentioned that there was an open spot in their internship program with the RFP team. And I think within 2 to 3 weeks, I had a couple rounds of online interviews, and about a month later, I had accepted my offer at Barings. So definitely want to stress the importance of kind of taking advantage of the resources that Furman has to offer, because the career track was pretty much a direct reason for my success.
Very good. Thank you, Clark. And we're going to come right back around in that order and ask you, when you think about not only the offer that you ultimately took, but all the offers, what was your success? What do you think your individual successes were and the reasons that you received the offers? Rachel?
Hi. So I think for me, it was really speaking to my strengths. Knowing that I come from a liberal arts school like Clark and Christina, using that to my advantage, and being able to sort of, control the conversation and speak to who I am as a person, not just trying to answer everything that the interviewer was throwing at me. What was really helpful was my mock interview with Chris Kapoor. I told him after I finally accepted my position at Bank of America that his interview was by far the hardest that I had. And I say that in a good way. He definitely prepared me. So any question I would have or follow up, I feel like I was right on the edge of my chair ready to answer. So big thanks to Chris for preparing me and making me feel comfortable. And I would also say those conversations, going back to the conversations with Furman alums, frequent phone calls with Jackson, I feel like I was well prepared to speak with professionals and sort of feel comfortable. And I think that, to me, is a big part of things. Speaking with people that I now had the chance to work with at Bank of America who interviewed me in the process, I think for them that was a big separator between the interns who got the job and then the final applicants who maybe fell a little bit short. And then just to touch a little bit on the overlap of the process. So my Bank of America Super Days, which is our final round interviews where they flew me up to New York, I actually had 2 within Bank of America for 2 different programs. And those were Wednesday and Friday. And then I had a video interview, which was a first round for another bank on Thursday. So all of the programs are within several months, but they do overlap a little bit. And for me, I loved my experience at Bank of America during my Super Day. So while that was the first final round interview and offer I received, I just decided to accept it. And then I withdrew my other applications from other banks.
Hey, Rachel, just to clarify for the audience, when about in the calendar were those Super Days? And then back up, what were the days and weeks that you were most focused on preparing for those?
Okay, so the applications opened June 1st, and they're rolling applications. So I tried to have my applications in for Bank of America as soon as I could. I think I submitted mine at the end of June. I really used July and August to sort of gather materials, get everything together. I had higher views, which are sort of an automated video interview for the next round. Those were around August. And then my first super day was middle of September. And then for other banks, similar timelines for the application. So over the summer, most were around July 1st. So Bank of America might have been a month earlier. But then I actually didn't have super days or final round interviews for those banks until mid-October into November. So while I could have held on to my offer and followed through with the rest of the banks, I was set in my decision and had a great experience.
Thank you for explaining that. Christina, given the fact that you explained your path was a little different, what do you think the secret to your success was to getting into a bank?
So I think one thing that definitely helped is that my resume showed my ambition and my dedication. Throughout my time at Furman, I've had different jobs. I've been part of lots of clubs while having 2 majors, at times 3, and being able to maintain a strong GPA. So I think at least that was able to initially show people that while maybe I didn't have the most intense background in finance or accounting, I'm someone who could most likely be trusted to be motivated, be dedicated, and learn very quickly. But once it got to more of those interview stages, one of my favorite things I was told was from someone at Wells Fargo during a networking event the evening before the interview. And he just told me, you're looking at banking. There's a long nights, long days, where they blur into each other and you're working 80 or 100 hours in a week. What we're really looking for right now is someone that we want to share a desk with. When you are exhausted, you want to be with someone that you can work with and be happy working with. So I think that even just being able to kind of show some of my personality, being able to be eloquent, give them a little bit about myself helped as well. But one thing that, especially for Wells Fargo, was a benefit for me was my background in healthcare. For corporate banking specifically, the different groups are divided by industry. So I was actually able to get an offer in healthcare. And I do think that my background was specifically valued because there are 3 corporate banking interns in healthcare, and 2 of us are public health majors. So there's definitely an understanding that that kind of background can be beneficial. And I even just think that in the interview, being able to speak passionately about healthcare, have knowledge about the industry, kind of showed some of that interest and was part of why I was able to get the offer.
Thank you. Clark, thinking about your prep for Barings, which is one of the big names, especially in higher yielding corporate credit, not to mention these alternative asset strategies, what do you think the secret to your success was?
Yeah, I think that something that was really helpful to me was just kind of building a foundation. So obviously I had the experience with the prior internships, but also getting involved in stuff like the investment club or just kind of speaking casually with friends or mentors or colleagues about the financial world. It's obviously, there's a lot of different paths and ways you can look at it, but just to be able to kind of speak comfortably and have kind of a background knowledge for when you do get into the interviews to have that confidence and the foundation underneath you, I think is really helpful and something that was a key to my success. And on the other side of things, as far as like the soft skills, I was really adamant about every time that I spoke with someone, I would try and follow up with a thank you email and try and stay in touch with them throughout the future. Just little things like that, because it really is competitive and there's tons of other kids that are exactly in our shoes. So anything that you can do to really separate yourself from somebody else would be a major key to finding success, in my opinion.
Very good. And we'll come back around and I'm going to ask you, you can be as specific or as general as you want, but what do you think you've learned most from your experience this summer? Rachel?
So I think beyond the training, my program was shortened from a 10-week program to a 6-week program. So I heard the saying a lot, but I was definitely drinking out of a fire hose, retaining a lot of information. But I would say professional development, operating in a work setting, even though we were remote, communicating with my mentors and my analysts who were more or less in charge of me this summer, and managing directors. I think learning how to operate as an intern, and sort of knowing my place as sort of a cog in a wheel for different deals. That was definitely very helpful and something that I learned as I went through and progressed through the internship.
Christina, what did you learn most from your experience this summer?
So again, I mean, of course I did lots of research about the industry, but one of the most important things that I've learned is what corporate banking is and what roles exist within it and how they all work together. You know, you can read a lot of things online, but it's not actually going to give you a real look at what the deal flow looks like and what each of the individual roles are and how everyone's able to work together. I mean, it's just been really great, even with the virtual environment, to have gotten such a great look at that and really understand what the work looks like from all perspectives. And fortunately, we did get a lot of really good training, which for me was especially valuable. You know, we had accounting classes, Excel classes, and I mean, I really appreciated that because I feel like it really helped me be immediately more valuable and really be able to put my best foot forward.
Thank you. And Clark, you mentioned earlier that you came in and were part of the RFP group. For those that don't really know what that is, that's a pretty important piece that's kind of sitting in between the company getting new business and the end customer. So I'm thinking communications and a lot of skills that you learned around here have helped you there. What would you say has that you learned the most from this experience?
Right. Yeah. Just going off that, I think that it's really important to just not close yourself off to any of the open doors. Barings is a much younger company than Wells and Bank of America. And something that I've learned talking to a lot of the people throughout is that there's a ton of lateral movement throughout the firm. People kind of build out different roles and find what they're interested in, what suits them the best. And kind of in my role sitting between sales and the investment teams, I've been able to see a ton of different side of the firm. So I would just recommend that you don't come in with a closed mind and like a set path that this is the only thing that you want to do, because it's just proven that there's a ton of opportunities and you never know where things are going to take you. So.
Thank you. And we've heard a lot from each of you already, as well as the professionals that have been through this process. I'm going to put each of you on the spot and say, beyond what we've already heard, Rachel, I'll start with you. What advice would you give to other students looking to land a similar role? So I'm going to put, for those folks that are like you, kind of figured it out early, give me a kind of a real powerful, this is what you got to do.
I think persistency is key. At my internship at the Capital Corporation in Greenville, they have a saying, the key to success is consistent persistence. And I 100% agree with that. You have to sort of know where you're going. Again, what Clark said, knowing that the path might not be a straight line and you might end up at a different firm or doing something different than you originally imagined, but stay the course. You might get tossed around a little bit and things might not work out at first, but stay the course and really lean on the people who have succeeded. So for me, that was Jackson. He sort of gave me advice from his perspective, what he maybe wished he would have done more or something that he found was really successful for him. And so I did that. And if someone didn't respond, I was persistent and followed up. So I had in mind what I wanted to do. I really set my mind to it and I pursued it.
Christina, thinking about sophomores and juniors and maybe even a few freshmen that aren't quite sure, maybe they're thinking another line of career, what advice would you give them since you made that pivot, you know, in the middle part of your career here?
Yeah, I have two main pieces of advice, and they might sound like they contradict each other, but I promise they don't. The first one is to start as early as possible. If this is something you think you're going to be interested in, do research, talk to people, network, use your resources just to learn about the industry, see what you might see yourself doing, and then work from there to kind of make a plan and see what's going to be the best way for you to enter. But going along with that, it's never too late to start. Like I said, I didn't know I was even interested in this until about a year ago, and I'm finishing up an internship now. So you really can start at any point. You're going to have to work really hard. You're going to have to do lots of research on your own. You're going to have to still reach out to people and talk to people just on a shorter time frame, but you can still do it. And another thing that I do want to say is don't underestimate yourself. I definitely, at some of the interviews, would look around and I'd see all the name tags and it felt like every person there was from an Ivy League school. They double majored in finance and accounting and they were just this like dream candidate. But I got an offer. And so don't underestimate yourself. Don't think that because you're not this candidate that you are thinking is ideal. Doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to get an offer, because that might not even be what they're looking for.
That was great. Clark, you got to top that. What advice would you give other students looking to land a role like yours?
Those are tough ones to top. Yeah, I definitely want to piggyback on just being proactive. I think really getting yourself ahead of the game is the key, because it does start early. Obviously, the applications open in June, and the interview processes go throughout the fall. So if you can be ready at this time, that's definitely helpful. And just kind of take pride in your brand and represent Furman well. I think there's a lot of really successful people, as you can see, the investment professionals. It's really important just to be proud of what you've accomplished, and know that Furman really does prepare you to separate yourself from other people in the finance world. So.
Well, thank you all for sharing your thoughts there. And we did receive some additional questions in advance, so I'm going to curate these and then farm them out as we go. And I'd like to start with the working professionals first, and you, Jeff. This is a question that came in. What skills did you acquire uniquely from attending a Furman liberal arts type of school that has given you an advantage in the workplace, let's say, versus what Christina was just talking about, maybe a polished state school or an Ivy that had a full curriculum in finance or banking?
Yeah, that's a great question. As I think about it, and I realize this more and more every year. It's been a long. I'm a dinosaur at this point, so it's been quite a while since I was in college. But I think for me, it really goes back to critical thinking and the ability to pivot and swivel, whether that's from one role to another. I've been in a lot of different roles with the bank over the years, or just going from one task to the next. You've just got to have the ability to exercise your brain, manage a lot of things, and sort of move quickly through those things. And I think the exposure I had to everything in a liberal arts education really helped set me up for success from that perspective. The other thing is that exposure I had, I think at the end of the day, has also helped me better, given me a better ability to gauge my audience and modulate the different styles, particularly as the bank has grown over the years. I started out with like a regional Southern bank, and now we're on a global scale. And so, working with people in the South is different than working with people in the Northeast, or certainly people in the West. And so it's kind of funny. I can quickly determine whether my Southern accent is endearing or not. And so you know how to modulate to that depending on whatever the country you're in and how you're interacting with folks. And I think a lot of that came from the diversity I was exposed to at Furman and all the different experiences I had.
Hey, Jackson, what would you add to that? What skills do you think you acquired from a liberal arts school that has helped you at the bank?
Yeah, just kind of being exposed to a lot of different things that I was interested in definitely gave me like a framework in which to think. I mean, especially like the way that we teach economics here at Furman was especially useful to how to think about problems or businesses or things that I look at. And I mean, that's especially useful because, I know a ton of people who study very nuanced things at other colleges, big state schools, Ivies, and it's not necessarily as applicable when you get out. So having that framework to think has been really helpful to assess different problems. And then just kind of having in my back pocket for conversations or interests, like the different classes I took unrelated to finance or economics or whatnot, definitely kind of gave me like that fulsome experience that I can definitely share and talk about and I'm still interested in. Kind of help me be that person that's interesting to sit next to for 100 hours a week. And I think that's definitely been helpful.
Sarah, what can you add to that?
So I think to me, like the biggest benefit, just more broadly that I've seen from Furman in my career is just the level of engagement that you got from the smaller class sizes. I think, not being a wallflower in class and, participating in the conversation with professors and students is a great skill. I even think about my senior seminar that I took within my economics major at Furman. It was about the 10 people, and we took turns basically at each class who would teach and lead the discussion. And, I didn't think about it at the time, but that's a really good skill for, we've gone into the business world, because it's not a talked about skill, but being able to effectively and efficiently lead a meeting. No one likes seeing a meeting that doesn't accomplish anything. So being able to have those skills to drive the discussion and get to whatever you're trying to accomplish is really important. And I think, Furman helped me with that.
Thank you, Sarah. Jeff, a question came in specifically for you. I think it ties back to the theme of your background. And this person looked you up according to your LinkedIn profile. Clearly, you were majored in history and involved with music and German. How were you able to study the coursework you were passionate about while also having a level of pragmatism needed to develop the type of career after school that you did? And do you find now that you still have enough time to keep up with your interests like music and German per se?
Sure. So I appreciate the question. It is an interesting story if you think about my background and how I wound up where I am today. And that's one of the things I really think is so interesting about types of webinars or networking is I just enjoy hearing about people's career journeys and how they got to where they are. For me, I was just really fortunate that I had a great support system at Furman. My freshman year, I planned to major in music performance. And to single one individual out within the music program would be nearly impossible because that was the center of so much of my 4 years there. I knew as I was entering my freshman year that I wanted to participate in the study abroad program to study music in Vienna, Austria. So I took the required German classes and was accepted to that program. And then through the influence of my clarinet professor, Dr. Robert Cheesebro, and my German professor who actually accompanied our class to Vienna, Dr. Jane Chiu, I was able to take private lessons from the wife of a member of the Vienna Philharmonic, and that was just really cool. However, as I reflected back on that incredible experience, I realized that in my heart I had talent, but I got, sitting in Vienna, I got a good sense of the level of talent you needed to have to make it my career in music. So I got back home, and it wasn't long after that, as I returned to Furman's campus, that I was heavily influenced by a history class that I took with Dr. Marion Strobel. And she took a real interest in me, and when I expressed my love of history and a possible desire to attend law school, she agreed to become my advisor for the rest of my tenure at Furman. So you're likely asking, well, how did all this lead to banking? So as I mentioned earlier on, I was very involved in the music program. You know, that was due to my love of music as well as the fact that I needed to maintain the partial music scholarship I had. So as I finished my junior recital, in the spring of that year, I found myself with 2 summer options. One was a scholarship to the Brevard Music Center in North Carolina, or an internship with First Union National Bank, which after many, many mergers, is now known as Wells Fargo. So choosing between those 2 opportunities was another tough decision, but I really thought that if I was potentially going to be applying to law school in the next year, I felt like the banking experience would be more relevant. So very much like that study abroad experience, that summer internship with the bank was literally life-changing. I became instantly interested in all the various roles and complexities associated with banking. And then that really enabled me to move into my final year at Furman, my senior year, knowing that I'd found the right career. And so as I mentioned earlier on, I had an internship with the bank summer before my senior year. The summer after my senior year, fortunately, when I approached them about, wanting to come back to work, they offered me a full-time role. And, back then, 30 years ago, it was a little bit of a different process. I sort of came in through the back door, but I just felt very fortunate. I was able to join the bank right out of school, then have just worked hard ever since then. Oh, and the other question around the music today. So I would say sadly, no. I still enjoy attending concerts, and I sing in our church choir, obviously, pre-COVID days. But with a career that required a lot of travel over the years, our 2 girls, one like their dad participated in varsity sports in high school. Most of my time is spent working, being a dad, and even more recently beginning to get involved in our local community now that we are empty nesters. So, thank you for the question. Chris, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, we're getting some targeted questions now, so I'm going to curate and ask a few of you individually. So unlike me, don't forget to come off of mute. The one question that came in, or a thought that's come in, I believe, is the reference to questions that some of us around campus use to help prep and ask some of our panelists. And I'll answer that 2 ways just from my seat. Any of us can Google typical finance interview questions and get a pretty broad list. But I can tell you specifically what I put Rachel through was way different than what I put Christina through, was different than when I pushed Jackson. And you have to know a little bit about the individual to tailor the questions that you think they're going to struggle with or have to answer. So I don't mean to dodge that, but any student that's on this that wants a list of questions, I'm happy to help you come up with that. But to be more effective, whether it's your mentor or the folks in the Malone Center or anywhere, you have to get to know them so they can get to know you to know how to best help you. And certainly your professors would fall into that camp. Here's a really good one that's just come in, and I'm going to only pick a few of you. Jackson, you laid out a pretty compelling story earlier. The key word is how. How did you decide that you wanted to be an investment banker while you were at Furman?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I've done a few different roles at Bank of America since I've been there, but I can tell you kind of better how and why finance. And it was kind of like a nuanced thing where my dad worked for the Fed when I was a kid, and I was always interested in stocks and bonds and companies. And reading about it in the Wall Street Journal was like a paper on the breakfast table every morning. And I didn't really know how to put two and two together. And then I started trading my own account and started trading stocks and bonds, and I learned about the investment committee or the investment club. And from there, I just kind of coincidentally met Chris Kapoor and Rob Kinney. And I had no idea what I was doing at the time, but I was really excited about it. And I kind of put together from Chris and a few conversations with my friends' parents that, you can take this interest and you can, make a pretty good living off of it. And from there, I just kind of used my motivation and drive to, find B of A and find a role that fit my interests. And thus far, the good thing for me is every day my job is something new and something a little bit different, and it's something financial. And, I've been really, really pleased with it so far.
So Rachel, I'm going to change that just a little bit for you, because I think you sort of figured it out a little bit earlier. And why did you think investment banking? Why not an equity analyst or, a junk bond trader or, a derivative specialist? It seems like you knew that earlier. What gave you the clue? How did you decide that?
I think I was really interested. At first, I was interested in M&A in the deal process. So that's why I pursued my first internship at the Capital Corporation. They do mostly M&A work in the low mid-market. But then after taking a public finance class when I was studying abroad, that sort of tailored my interest a little bit more specifically to public finance investment banking. And then that's when I met Jackson, who was doing just that. And after talking to him and his colleagues on the floor at Bank of America, that's how I sort of navigated and decided that was what I exactly wanted to do.
And Sarah, I'm going to throw this one your way. I think you'll have a pretty good idea here, but a question just came in on the chat. How do you think the coronavirus situation will affect internship programs next summer, just generally? Because this student says, the one I was looking at, was kind of canceled on the fly. And how likely do you think that'll be a year from now? I know you're not a doctor or anything, but what do you think is going to happen for the summer of 21?
Yeah, so I definitely won't try to predict the future, but I mean, as far as this past summer, we obviously still held our internship program, because Clark was a part of our program, and we're moving forward with our interview process and applications for interns for next year. So as of now, we're planning on stopping the program, even though it's just virtual. Means I know those applications start end of August and interviews in October. And as far as I've heard, that's still all on track. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised at just speaking with a lot of interns this summer at how smooth the transition was to being all virtual. A lot of them I think found that it was actually easier to get time on people's calendar and, to almost be more intentional with getting to meet people. And so from everyone I've heard from, it sounds like our internship program this past year was a success. So I'd be shocked if we didn't do it next year, even if it has to be virtual, but hopefully it's not. Hopefully we're in person.
A thumbs up or a nod from all of you. From what you've seen and what your companies are doing, even if they are virtual next summer, is the process generally the same? The internship postings are still online and it's the same process generally, or is everything different even with how you source the opportunities?
Same.
I would say yes, it's going to be the exact same. And I just want to build on that and say that for B of A, the internship window is open now. And generally how this works at large banks, and those are pretty much the only ones I can speak for really, we have 2 rounds really of internship kind of processing, application processing, one of which is starting now and will probably be closed in the next 2 weeks. They'll review that cycle of resumes. They'll start figuring out who they're going to come in for super days. And then our window actually closes September 1st. So just prior to that window closing, they'll actually do another pool of resumes, sort through, do a second super day to finish out their class. So it starts really early. And if you're even considering it or on the fence, I would suggest you submit your resume now.
Thanks, Jackson. I just want to let the audience know we've got just under 5 minutes to go, and then we're going to conduct another poll based on some of the information we've heard. But I want to ask Jeff a question real quick. Can you give me an example of maybe how an eager undergrad that's reached out to you, something they've done with their networking that you really liked, and conversely, maybe a pet peeve or an activity that students have done that's turned you off?
Sure. I think the thing that has compelled me most is the eagerness of college students to network and their sincere desire to do that. And a couple of things that have impressed me is I had the opportunity to participate in a career track at the bank this past January. And a couple of those students followed up with me afterwards and wanted to connect either by phone or in person. So I had the opportunity to buy a cup of coffee at Starbucks on the Furman campus for a couple of folks. And I just read that, just their desire to learn more about my area of the bank, my career path, and just learning more about, the experiences and helping them better understand the questions they need to ask as they continue navigating into their career. That was just very impressive to me. I think the one thing that perhaps leaves a little bit of a bad taste in your mouth is when you have someone that follows up and asks for that, and then you circle back and offer availability and you don't hear back. So most of the time, folks are very good about following through. But if you reach out to someone, it's really poor form not to follow up with them if they're offering to give you your time, because that's one thing I found. It's just, you see this in the academic world and you see this in the professional world. People are so willing and generous to share their time and share the experiences, and they really want to sincerely help you. But you should take that very seriously and not only show appreciation, but certainly follow up.
And I'm going to wrap with a final short question. I think I'm going to pick Christina for this one. And you've covered so much today, and your situation is unique, like everyone else's on the panel. But can you tell me one thing maybe that you've done outside of class that has allowed you to stand out, a difference maker, a value add?
I can think of 2 things. I'll have to pick one of them. Honestly, for me, I think mock trial has been really, really impactful. I've always done a lot of presentations throughout my time in middle school, high school, everything, but mock trial puts you in a different situation where you're timed, you're under pressure, you're going to be asked the most difficult questions possible, and you need to be able to keep your cool, keep your character, and just go with it and be responsive and do a really good job. And I think that's a skill that was so helpful for me, obviously while going through the interview process, because they're going to ask you some tough questions. They're going to ask you some things that are a little bit uncomfortable, and you need to be able to think on your feet and give a really valuable response. But I think it's also even just helpful in normal situations, because being able to speak eloquently is something that always goes a long way. And being able to just communicate about yourself and your interests is one of the ways you can make sure you get where you're trying to go.
Thank you. And before I think we turn it back to Lauren and Diane to wrap with a poll, I wanted to take just a second and thank Lauren and Diane and Kristen and Steve and Andy and John and everyone that helps support you do what you do to help our students. And the panelists, you've been so gracious with your time and joining us tonight. We are all greatly appreciative, and I'm sure the participants in the audience are as well. Lauren, back to you.
Thanks, Chris. As our webinar comes to a close, I just want to say a really big thank you to all of our panelists for taking time out this evening to speak with our students, and a special thanks to you, Chris. We're so fortunate to have you and your expertise, and I know our students are so grateful for that. So thanks to all of you for participating, and to all of our students and staff and faculty that have joined us tonight as well. We wanted just to take a moment to ask one last poll. So I'm going to launch the poll question here. So if you all would just, the students that are with us tonight, if you all could share with us which area that you would be most interested in receiving additional information or additional programs on to help the Malone Center and the internship office plan for future programming. And while you're doing that, I'll also share, if you have other ideas of program that you think would be beneficial to you, we'd be very open to hearing the types of programs that you all would like to see this upcoming year. All right, well, thank you. I think that completes our poll. We appreciate your time tonight. And once again, a really big thanks to all of our panelists and to Chris for moderating tonight's panel. I hope everyone has a good night.
Before you go, for the registrants, our panelists have graciously agreed to provide their contact information, so you'll be receiving that along with links with upcoming internship and job opportunities. So many thanks to you all, and have a wonderful evening.